Yellow. The fear of death makes perfect sense at first. Of course, it is Mother Nature's agenda to survive and reproduce, and everything we feel is, in essence, a agenda to that end. Our instinctive drives, the way we think, what we are, all of nature is, in essence, existing because nature's agenda at its very core is to survive and reproduce. Now, with that said, the fear of death from that perspective makes perfect sense. But if you consider what our rate of innovations have established for us today, sure, there is still tremendous suffering. There is still a lot of people going through very hard times, especially today. But even then, the level of mitigated suffering we've accomplished, it's a completely different world compared to what our instinctive drives feel, compared to what our biology feels. We've achieved a level of prosperity that our biology just has not been able to keep up with. Thus, a lot of the things that we feel and experience in day-to-day society, the anxieties we feel, some of them are very justified. Sure, many of it can still be justified today, but even then, our instinctive drives blow it out of proportion. We get stifled walking past, say, an attractive person. If we want to give a speech to the classroom, our brain thinks, oh no, I'm in front of a huge crowd, I might be being persecuted right now. And then you start feeling tremendous fear. You start becoming overreactive. In essence, there is just a disconnect between what you feel fear towards, what you perceive as a threat, and the actuality of that level of threat. In honesty, most of the things that scare you won't really harm you. Of course, if you're a fighter, that's a different story, but consider this. Even at the highest levels of combat, to be afraid is kind of important to some extent, to have those nerves. That's in essence what those nerves are. But to have a control over them, courageously transcend them, not necessarily to eliminate them, but to have a purpose, a vision greater than it, and to feel confident, comfortable with the situation so that you may reframe that anxiety to excitement. It's just the person operating at the highest level has prepared for that fear and feels a completely different experience through it due to their perception. They no longer call it fear, even though it's the same hormonal response. Their perception and their preparation has turned it into excitement, it's turned it into respect, it's turned it into a more positive experience that makes the entire thing much more meaningful. They search for it. And so even then, if you consider the fear of death, it's encoded into their being. But to truly treat it like fear works to one's detriment because you won't be able to leverage everything you've worked so hard to cultivate. In that sense, through this understanding, we realize how detrimental, how inhibiting fear actually is. It keeps us from being what we are. It stifles us, it restricts us, it lowers our sense of status and makes us feel small. It keeps us from doing simple things. Thus, moving forward, you experience a life of regret. But here's a narrative that I'd like to share with you that's helped me a lot, especially. Even if you fail, even if it doesn't work out, even if you look like a fool, at the end of the day, no one cares. People will go on with their lives, and I will go on with mine. It doesn't matter. So then, what does matter? First, living a life we do not regret. And second, overcoming the fear itself. That should be the mission. If you are someone who is deeply inhibited by fear, not everyone, but most people, we are restricted, deeply inhibited by our fears. If that is us, the goal is not what we seek. Instead, every time you face your fear, whether you win or lose, if you're the kind of person who's shackled by fear, regardless of what happens, so as long as you try and say, I'm proud of myself. Even if I don't get it, I'm proud of myself because I faced my fear. If you're the kind of person who can do that, you will grow from each experience. You'll be able to look at it, reflect, and say, why didn't this work? I can improve the next time, but either way, I am so proud of myself because I faced my fear. If you can do that, not only will that freedom of outcome allow you to be more fluid, allow you to flow towards your end goal more effectively each time, thus more consistently leverage success. Even if you miss, you'll have more mental bandwidth available to reflect on the problem, thus be able to better transcend it the next time. Reward yourself for facing fear. Don't entitle yourself to the outcome. Entitle yourself to the process, and every time you are courageous, bold enough to venture off into the darkness, beyond your fears. If overcoming your fear is the end goal, to be courageous despite your fear, you win every single time. And you will succeed more and more often. You will become better and better and better through reflection. How can I improve? How can I improve? How can I improve? Even when you win, even when you get it, it wasn't about that. Who cares? What mattered was that you ventured off towards something you were afraid of. This minimized the regrets you would have in life. And you learned from it. As through that process anyways, your reward was you got more of what you wanted anyways. It was a win-win-win, regardless of what happens. Regardless of what happened, you just always won. This is the mind we should take towards our life, I believe, especially if you are someone who's afraid. And it's as custom motto had said. That's just it. If you're worried about getting hit, you won't have a good sense of anticipation and you'll be more likely to get hit. And that's life in its entirety. If you're so worried about not getting what you want, you probably won't be able to get what you want. To be bold and courageous, to step forward into chaos. It's the age-old saying. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's knowing some things are more important, and even if you don't have a great sense of meaning, a great justification to pull you beyond the veil of the unknown, this is something you can take with you regardless. To overcome fear for the sake of overcoming fear. Also that fear does not control you. Because at the end of the day, what's really going to happen? You'll likely be okay. The level of threats that exist within society today, they just aren't there. We don't have the same level of threats, even if your mind perceives threats everywhere. Even if you're in a constant state of anxiety because you look around at the world and it just feels like threat, constant people judging because you think, oh man, if this person is judging me, what if they do something to me? Of course, rationally, logically, no, that person's not going to do anything. But your instinctive drive say, what if he's from a neighboring tribe? And I do something silly, and he smashes me with a rock. What if he hits me over the head with a rock? That's what your instinctive drives are telling you, because the past was much more dangerous. It was a time where women and children could not walk in broad daylight. History tells a story far worse than most of us could ever even imagine. And that is what's etched into your being. That is what your instinctive drives are worried about. But logically, to this present day, those same fears don't really make sense. Thus, to fear death, through nature's agenda, it makes perfect sense, but through our current biological drives in proportion to our current tier of established society, there's still tremendous problems that exist today, but our fear of death, it just inhibits us from living life. It inhibits us from piercing the veil of the unknown, thus keeps us in a state of regret. We know, we knew, we understood, we could have, but we didn't because for some reason we were afraid. And so as long as we have that fear of death in our heart, we restrict ourselves from ever being able to fully manifest the first place? And if you think about it, will you really lose your life? If you're a sane human being who's built the foundation to navigate effectively, to have the sensibility and good intentions, to have good intentions moving forward, if that's the case with you, will something bad happen to you? Even in the worst case scenario, you'll likely be okay. Accidents may happen, but even if you play it safe, accidents may happen. Thus, you might as well live. And the paradox is, you just can't do that if you're afraid to die. Because that fear, imagining phantoms, constantly making up illusions, assuming there are threats everywhere when there likely aren't. When most people don't even care. They're too busy with their own lives. They're too busy focusing on their own thing. They may say something, but at the end of the day, each person has way too many problems of their own to truly care about yours. If this is true, at the end of the day, that constant fear, letting it keep us where we are, it'll be the worst fate of all. It'll be a life of regret. To live, one must be willing to die. Until next time. Peace.